Let's get to this day in history.
This day in history.
This is a fitting this day in history, as they frequently are. All nature is but art unknown to thee. On this day in history, in 1606, Guy Fawkes, the chief conspirator in the plot to blow up the British Parliament building, jumped to his death on the way up to be executed. You all know the Guy Fawkes mask. It's worn by pseudo-rebellious idiots who occupy Wall Street and wear gynecological headwear while they shriek profanities in protest of nothing in particular. You've seen these things. It's come to serve as a universal symbol of resistance, of protest. But ask any of the people wearing the masks, and I would bet you my Shapiro election check that they have no idea who Guy Fawkes is or what he stood for. So I rather like this story as the resident papist at the Daily Wire. I look forward to harshing all the lefties' mellows. The night before the general parliamentary session in 1605, on November 4th, Justice of the Peace Sir Thomas Knivet discovered Guy Fawkes in the cellar of the Parliament building with 4,000 pounds of gunpowder. Fawkes belonged to a group of disillusioned English Catholics organized by Robert Catesby, who sought to blow up, figuratively and literally, England's Protestant government all the way up to King James I, who was set to attend Parliament that day on November 5th. Now, James notoriously persecuted both aspects of my ancestry, English Puritans and Catholics. There are a few subjects on which Catholics and Mayflower passengers agree. James I is one of them. In the ensuing months after Fawkes' capture, English authorities rounded up and killed all of the conspirators in the gunpowder plot, in addition to arresting, torturing, and killing dozens of English Catholics who had absolutely nothing to do with it. Guy Fawkes was sentenced to be hanged, drawn, and quartered by January 31st. But as he climbed the ladder, rather than give the Anglicans that pleasure, he jumped from the ladder and broke his own neck. Guy Fawkes Day is celebrated throughout Great Britain on the 5th of November with fireworks, bonfires, the burning in effigy of Guy Fawkes, celebrating the day that Protestant England survived. One wonders how differently English history and world history would have progressed had the plot prevailed. Henry VIII, famously broke Britain away from her ancestral Catholic faith, despite in 1521 having written a book so critical of Martin Luther that Pope Leo X gave him the title Defender of the Faith, an ironic title because in 1535, frustrated that the Pope kept stymieing Henry's desires to divorce and murder his wives, Henry declared himself supreme head of the Church of England, for which he was excommunicated by Pope Paul III. In 1570, Pope St. Pius V excommunicated Henry's younger daughter, Elizabeth I, and declared her officially deposed for her persecution of Catholics in England. And we are not just talking about your everyday run-of-the-mill persecution of Catholics, what we're seeing throughout the world for so long. We're talking about behead your own sister, Mary Queen of Scots, for being Catholic kind of persecution of Catholics. It is this sort of persecution that makes many literary scholars think Shakespeare was a secret Catholic. Anyway, after Elizabeth's death in 1603, James VI of Scotland succeeded her and became James I of England. They changed their names a lot, their reigning names. So he became James I. James was a Protestant, but unlike Elizabeth, he had never been a Catholic. There was no time at which he was a Catholic. James is the first cradle Protestant monarch of England. And it's easy for us now, especially watching The Crown or whatever movies are coming out, it's easy for us to think of England as a Protestant country. But you shouldn't forget, Catholicism reigned in England for well over 1,000 years. There have been, for much longer than any Protestant reign, multiples as long. There had been Celtic Christianity, largely in accordance with Rome, from the 1st century AD, and St. Augustine of Canterbury brought the first authoritative papal mission, establishing a direct link between the Kingdom of Kent and the See of Rome in 597. Had the gunpowder plot worked to dislodge from England the merely 2 generations old Protestantism effected by 2 murderers, one who killed his wives and the other who killed her sister, would England have reverted to her ancestral Catholic faith? Would the King James Version of the Bible, considered by many the greatest work of the English language, would that exist? All good questions, made more urgent by the deplorable state of the Church of England today, a husk of ecclesiology, and Great Britain generally. But the more personal question for all of us is what precisely is meant by the Guy Fawkes masks? In our cultural and political battles today, who are the real rebels and who has God on their side? Good questions.